Welcome to Failure is Progress, presented by Sweat Factory CrossFit. I am Coach Frankie Ortega.
And I am Coach Keith Barber. Join us today as we discuss everything going on inside the CrossFit space, and more importantly, what new and exciting things are happening in our Sweat Factory CrossFit gyms.
As always, thank you to all of our listeners. We appreciate the support and truly enjoy the feedback we've been receiving from all of you.
Please reach out through our DMs on Instagram. If you aren't already following us, please do so at Failure is Progress, all lowercase. And now, on to today's episode.
Welcome to another episode of Failure is Progress. I am Coach Frankie. Today I have a very special guest. His name is Santiago Callejas. Did I say that right?
You got it right, dude. Congratulations.
I think I said that right. Santiago Callejas is the owner of Riptide CrossFit in Fort Lauderdale, and he has been training and coaching for a long time. He is also CrossFit seminar staff, which is actually where I met him. Santi was one of the coaches in my L2 seminar, which I took January of last year. And I have him on the podcast with us today just to bring more value to our listeners. So, Santi, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well, brother. Happy and stoked to be on this podcast with you and your listeners.
I appreciate your time, man. So, I know that you are Colombian.
Yes, sir. Born in Colombia, Medellin, Colombia.
No kidding. That's awesome, man. When did you come to the U.S.?
So my parents brought me to the U.S. when I was about 3 years old. So I was raised in Austin, Texas.
Nice.
Yeah. So they migrated here. And I didn't have a choice, right? So at 3 years of age,
That's awesome.
Spent my young half of my life at this point in Austin, and the other half I've been here in South Florida.
How long have you been in South Florida?
20 years at this point, maybe 21.
Okay.
Like about 13 in Miami, and the rest here in Fort Lauderdale.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Yeah, I was in Miami for all my life. I was born and raised in Hialeah, and then moved up to Orlando in 2020 at just the right time. And it's been interesting to have to kind of make a whole new life out here.
I can imagine.
Have you ever been to Colombia?
Oh, yes. I did have I was fortunate for my family, was fortunate enough to take me back to Colombia multiple times growing up. And I've gone pretty much since, being a young kid throughout my entire life, at least once a year, sometimes twice a year. And I've even moved to Colombia and I lived there for about a year and a half in Medellin. This was about 11 years ago. I went to Colombia to try to open a CrossFit gym, actually. And
I was going to ask that. Were you already in the CrossFit space, and what did you do while you were there? That's cool.
Yes. I was already coaching, fully invested into the CrossFit community. And my thought was to go to Colombia and open up a gym there. And
were you already a gym owner in the U.S. at the time?
No. So this was prior to owning Riptide CrossFit. This was in my early days of coaching. So 2014, I started coaching in 2011. So I'd only been coaching for like 2-3 years. And a really good friend of mine from Miami, that we became really good friends in Miami, pre-CrossFit. We started CrossFit together. We started coaching together. And we were like CrossFit buddies. And him and I both had a vision of owning a gym together. And we actually tried first in Wynwood. Before Wynwood was even Wynwood, how everyone knows it nowadays.
Right.
It was the early days, pre-Wynwood, pre-development. It was, very ghetto in that area. But it was the initial development of it. And so there was a little bit of a buzz in Miami about this is going to be the new trendy area to be in, blah, blah, blah. So him and I started looking.
Which it is now.
Yeah, now it is. We started looking for warehouses to open a CrossFit gym in that area. We were actually looking right on the main strip of what currently is known as Wynwood. And that was, I want to say 2013-ish. And so We did that. We actually found a couple of spaces. We had an investor. We went through that entire process, and we were borderline signing a lease. And then the investor had experienced a loss with their money. And so, right when we were about to
Oh,
sign the lease, the investor was like, dude, I don't have the money anymore. So we had to pull out. Kind of dramatic, to be honest.
yeah.
So, we continued our pursuit of trying to be gym owners. And we said, hey, what if we go to South America? He's Brazilian, I'm Colombian. We talked about both locations. And just at the time, he hadn't been back to Brazil in many years, and he didn't have much of a network or connections in Brazil. And I was a little bit more current with that. So we visited
Okay.
Medellin a couple of times just to scope out the situation in the CrossFit gyms down there. And we felt like there was opportunity. So then we relocated to Medellin. And we went through that experience for a year and a half. Clearly didn't work out. And but it
Yeah.
was an awesome experience to just be living in my country and doing CrossFit down there, visiting all the gyms and gym owners, and going through that whole process in Medellin.
Is there a big CrossFit community in Colombia?
Very big, very big. Yes, it is extremely popular down there. It looks and feels different than the way it does here in the U.S. or at least here in South Florida.
Okay.
But it's very much strong, just due to the currency and the socio-economic and like economic and political situation.
Of course.
Most CrossFit gyms over there are not affiliated. There was a large amount of affiliation in the beginning, but then just because of the currency exchange, it doesn't make a lot of
Of
sense for
course.
them to affiliate, or it's just a lot harder.
Of course.
So there's a lot of non-affiliated CrossFit gyms, and then obviously a lot of knockoff CrossFit, but all born from the first CrossFit affiliates in Medellin.
Right, right. Yeah, it's crazy to me when I learn about what CrossFit is like outside of the US. You don't know this about me. I'm relatively new to the CrossFit space. I started CrossFit in 22, and the more I grow into it and the more I learn about it, the crazier it gets. My gym is in Davenport, and I don't know if I recall telling you that, but I'm a general manager there, and
Yes, I do remember
we
that.
have, I would say we have about 90% of our population in the gym is Latino. Most of them are Venezuelan, Puerto Rican. I'm so I'm still surprised every time I see someone new come in from Venezuela and they're like in peak form. Venezuela has a huge CrossFit community, and they've got their own version of games they call the Fit Games. I've
Yep,
had a
yep.
ton of competitors come in who compete in the Fit Games, and it's just been a cool experience to see how many of them actually do CrossFit out there. I don't know how many are affiliated or whatnot, but I assume it's very similar to Colombia in that aspect.
Very similar. I actually had the opportunity to work a couple of seminars in Venezuela in the last year. And so
No kidding.
yeah, yeah. So I did a level one and a level two. Super
That is
cool
so
experience. And
you do the level 1 and L2 in Spanish as well.
yep, 100%.
That's cool.
Yeah, yeah.
We're
So
actually we're actually hosting the L1 in Spanish at my gym next month.
that's right. You did mention that to me. That's super cool. And very
I,
cool that you got it in Spanish.
man, it was really difficult to get done. It was really difficult,
Yes.
and I almost lost it. They told me HQ told me I had to have 10 participants, and I got the 10th participant on the last day of their deadline.
Oh, wow.
And it took me about 8 months going back and forth with HQ to get them to finally open it up. But we are getting it done. I'm still not 100% sure who the trainers are going to be, but I'm excited because I'm going to try to sit in and listen to all the lectures in Spanish and get that perspective.
That's awesome. When is it again?
February 15 and 16.
Okay, super cool.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, it's
That's awesome.
exciting, man. So let's go ahead and talk about that a little bit. What is it like for you being on seminars? Well, let's go a little before that. Let's go to you, getting into the CrossFit space as a trainer, right? You said you started training somewhere around 2011.
Yeah, so I started CrossFit in 2010, October 2010.
Okay.
That's when I started my own journey. Technically, I started dabbling, I should say, like many people do, with CrossFit workouts summer of 2010.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is I was working at an LA Fitness in Brickell, Miami. This was before Brickell was actually developed too. I feel so old saying that.
Yeah.
But right when Brickell was developing, specifically Mary Brickell Village, they were building out an LA Fitness in Mary Brickell Village, and it was under construction. I was serving tables in the area. I was a waiter. And I saw a sign that said now hiring trainers, sales, all positions at LA Fitness. And at the time, I was still going to FIU taking classes and getting my degree
Okay.
in business. And I was working a couple of serving jobs, doing the whole thing. And I had always known I wasn't going to work a regular corporate job, just like a regular desk job. I've known that since like high school.
Okay.
So I was always like fishing for ideas for a career, quote unquote. And around that time, I was like, maybe I need to explore something in fitness, or I should explore something in fitness just because it's always been a part of my life. Just grew up playing sports and being active and all that stuff. So I thought
What
about
kind
working
what
at it.
kind of sports did you always play?
So the main thing that I played was soccer.
Okay.
It's the only sport I ever played like organized, legit. Everything else I
So
played recreational, but I was one of those kids that just grew up playing outside all the time.
okay.
And so I played a little bit of everything growing up, but organized was soccer.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and then beyond that, I just like to be outside and ride bikes and monkey around. And I was just always that athletic kid playing a little bit of everything.
I got you. I got you. Okay, so
Yeah.
going back, LA Fitness, you decided, you know what, I'm gonna get into the fitness game.
Yeah, so I'm like, let me check this out. And I got a job there and I wanted to be a trainer. They're like, okay, you got to get certified first. So take these courses, get your certification. In the meantime, you can work as selling memberships at LA Fitness. So I did that, but I was studying to become a personal trainer. So I started reading about anatomy, physiology, exercise science, all that stuff.
Okay.
And in my studies, I found CrossFit workouts. And so I told my buddies, one of those being the Brazilian buddy, that later on joined me in this CrossFit journey. I said, hey, we should try these CrossFit workouts at the gym. And there was actually 3 of us that had become really good friends. So we started trying our own CrossFit workouts at LA Fitness in 2010. And that was our introduction to CrossFit. And then,
And what was that like in a LA Fitness? I'm curious.
yeah, everybody looked at us like weirdos. We're like, who the hell are these guys and what are they doing?
Why are they jumping on the floor?
Yeah, it helped a little bit. I guess, I don't know if it helped or made it worse, that most people who were going to the gym, it was a brand new gym. It had just recently opened up. And I helped open the gym, the LA Fitness, as a sales rep. So a lot of the people that were looking at me weird also knew who I was. It's like, oh, he's one of the
Okay.
employees here and he's doing this weird stuff. So I don't know. But we stuck to it. And then about 2-3 months of doing that, I was like, guys, let's try to join a local CrossFit gym. And at the time in Miami, there was about 4 or 5 affiliates. 2 of them were CrossFit Vita Brickell and the other one CrossFit Gables in Coral Gables.
Okay.
Not knowing that they were owned by the same people, we checked them out both and ended up joining CrossFit Gables because it was a little bit cheaper, to be honest.
That makes sense.
So the 3 of us joined CrossFit Gables. We did their on-ramp program, and that's where the whole thing started, like formally and officially October 2010.
So then what led you, at what point did you say, you know what, I want to go for my L1? And did you go for your L1 specifically to get into coaching, or did you just fall in love with the methodology?
All of it. That's a good question. So as soon as I set foot in a CrossFit gym, this is going to sound crazy, but I'm like, oh, this is going to be my career. I'm going to own a
No
CrossFit
kidding.
gym one day. And at the time, I was still playing a lot of soccer. And I'm not sure if you remember or you're aware, but these smaller turf soccer fields were starting to pop up everywhere in Miami. there weren't as many as there is now, but I was going to a lot of them to play tournaments just in leagues.
Okay.
And I had kind of this idea of blending some sort of fitness program with soccer. And so as soon as I stepped into the CrossFit gym, the idea popped into my head, oh, I'm going to do some kind of like soccer turf fields, 5-on-5, 7-on-7, the smaller ones,
Okay.
with a CrossFit gym. That's going to be my business. And I'm not kidding. That was like day one as soon as I stepped in.
Before the workout.
Yeah. I was way more in tune with like searching for a career. And I'm like, oh, I can become a CrossFit coach. I already know soccer, and I can just rent out soccer fields and become a trainer, train people, and blend, these two worlds together.
Nice.
That was my vision back then.
I ask because it's always interesting to me. I've been to the L1, I've been to the L2. I sat in on an L1 that we hosted. It's interesting to me how many athletes do the L1 and they do it more for the methodology than because they're interested in coaching. They just want more CrossFit and they want to understand it more. So it's always cool. A lot of people do take the L1, and I assume the numbers have shifted over the years. People who are interested in coaching to people who are just more interested in CrossFit, because like when I took the L1, I was already coaching, and it was a transition for me where I said, well, I can't just coach kids forever. I want to also learn more about CrossFit.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's good. Yeah, we see everything at seminars, like you're saying. We see people who are there with a purpose of like, oh, I want to become a trainer, so that's why I'm here. We have, people just like yourself who's like, I've been training already to some extent, and I want to make it official. And then we have those people that are like, oh, I'm not interested in becoming a coach or owning a gym, but I just want to educate myself further to improve my own fitness or my understanding of the methodology. Right. So we get a good blend of everything, but usually most people are there to become coaches.
Right. So when you get your L1, were you already aiming to start coaching? Did you already have like a gym that had offered you a coaching position contingent on your L1?
No. The way it worked was I'm like, okay, I started taking classes. I loved my first coaches at CrossFit Gables. Shout out to all of them because they taught me very well. It was a great foundation. And so I was like, okay, I want to become a trainer. I quickly asked them, what do I need to do? And they're like, you got to get your level 1. And then so I was one of those few people, I guess, that as I joined the CrossFit gym, parallel with that, I started to explore the CrossFit Journal and CrossFit.com. And I took a deep dive into learning all about CrossFit, not just at my affiliate with my coaches, but on the journal as well. And so the CrossFit Journal is pretty much, the Bible of CrossFit.
Yeah.
And I started reading all the articles, watching all the videos, following the games. It was the golden era of the games. It's when the games were really exploded from 2010 to 2017, 18. There was this big boom where the games became, that golden era that us old CrossFitters love.
Is that when Reebok took over?
Yeah, I was there right before Reebok took over. Then Reebok came in as a sponsor. Rogue was born in that time. And that's when, Rich Froning, Chris Spieler, and those athletes came into the sport or were part of the games community. And so I dove deep and I was like, all right, let me study for my level 1 and let me sign up for it as soon as I can. And at the same time, I told the gym owner, I'm like, hey, I'm going to take my level 1. I want to become a CrossFit coach. Are you guys hiring? And he's like, no, we're not hiring right now. But what we can do is until you take your level 1 or in the meantime, offer you some sort of like internship program. He called it the pipeline. We can't hire yet, but if you're interning and learning and an opportunity opens up, we would potentially hire you or anybody in the pipeline program. So I'm like, okay, so what do you want me to do? And he really didn't have like any positions open for interning, but I was that kind of person that took the initiative and bugged him until he let me shadow. So he's like, all right, go shadow at this gym. I'm like, what hours, what days, which coaches? He goes, okay, just whenever you have time, just come in and just watch the coaches. So I took it upon myself. He allowed me to do that. And I shadowed and watched coaches coach for about 3 months. So he offered me, they owned several locations at the time. And Mike Osuna, the gym owner of the I Am
Okay.
CrossFit family, he's still around with CrossFit Train 8, 9. He was like, do you want to go to one of our other locations? And I was like, absolutely stoked to do so. So I actually was very lucky. I got to rotate 4 different gyms, 4 different head coaches, 1 week at each. And I kind of went through a rotation like that for 3 months. Then
Nice.
I got my level 1 August 2011. And at that point, I started coaching pretty much as I could and slowly grew my coaching hours from there until I was able to quit serving tables and just coaching full time.
That's badass. How long did it take you from when you started coaching and that you had your L1 to when you decided to get your L2?
That's a good question. I want to say it was about a year and a half, 2 years.
And I assume when you got your L2, it was different than what the L2 is now.
Yeah, back then it was called the Coaches Prep Course. A lot of
Okay.
similarities, but very different in many ways. And I made a trip out of it. I actually went to Aromas, California, to the ranch where the first CrossFit Games were ever held.
No way.
Yeah, dude, I told you, man, I dove deep into this CrossFit stuff. I drank the Kool-Aid hard. So I went to Aromas and I took my level 2 at Aromas.
Who were your coaches?
Miranda Odroid, Katie Hogan, and Hollis Malloy. And I think it was just them 3, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it was
That's
just them
awesome,
3.
man.
Yeah.
I feel like everybody who takes their L1, L2, etc., like they don't forget their coaches.
Yeah, it was just them 3. And it was a great experience. And at that point, I already had the goal of becoming part of the seminar staff because I was so inspired by them when I took my level 1.
Interesting. So tell me, let's move on to that. Tell me a little bit about that journey. Like, so you get your L1 2011. You said a year and a half later you had your L2, which you took at the ranch. So what was that journey like? And was it the L2 itself where you were like, this is where I want to be. I want to be part of seminar staff, or was it already something you had hinted at or thought of before that?
Oh, yeah, no, I made that decision to do it when I took my level 1 during that weekend of my level
Okay.
1. I was like, so if I want to own a gym and become a really high level coach, to me, it just made sense. I should aim to be part of the CrossFit seminar staff. I mean, these guys are clearly the best trainers around.
Of course.
So if I want to make this a career, to me, that was a career path. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
one of the larger
I
steps.
didn't, I didn't look at it as like, oh, that would be cool. That would be fun. I saw it as like, oh, this is the way. Like if you want to be a doctor, you're like, oh, I got to work at a hospital.
Right.
So how do I get a job at a hospital? Oh, you got to do X, Y, Z. Okay, cool. Let me just do that. So in a way, I just interpreted my level 1 as like, oh, this is the career path for coaching. So let me follow the career path for coaching. And so I did just that. I kept running the journal. At the level 1, I asked Chuck Carswell, which on seminar staff, he's like the god of us coaches on seminar staff. Everybody loves him. He is one of the most phenomenal coaches I've ever met amongst, the best of the best. And so I just straight up asked him, hey, I really like the way you guys coached at this level 1, the way you presented everything. How do I get on the team? He's like, well, you got to coach a lot. Keep reading the journal. He asked me some questions. What are you doing to learn about coaching? I told him, he goes, okay, keep doing that. And at some point, you got to get your level 2. And when you show up to get your level 2, make sure you tell the trainers there you're interested in being part of the seminar staff. And they're going to watch you, observe you over that weekend. And if the team believes that you have the skills, the knowledge, and everything it takes to be part of the seminar staff, they'll let you know at the end of the weekend. I'm like, okay, sure, no problem. So I did exactly that. I kept coaching. A year and a half later, took my level 2. I showed up for my level 2 on day 1. to register just the way you did.
Of course.
And so they were like, okay, let me see your ID. Okay, you're all checked in. And I said, excuse me, I have a question. They're like, yes. I was told at my level one by Chuck Carswell that if I wanted to be part of the seminar staff to let you guys know. So they kind of smiled at me not knowing, that basically they're just going to watch me over the weekend to see if I'm good enough.
Right.
And I'm thinking I have to fill out some sort of job application, right? And they just kind of smiled, and Miranda said, okay, thanks for letting us know. Just take the course like you would normally, as a participant. Don't try to do anything special or out of the ordinary. Just participate, and then we'll have a conversation with you after the course. I'm like, okay, but do I need to fill out any paperwork or anything? Where do I apply? And they're like, no, you don't have to apply or do anything. Just hang out, take the course, soak it all in, learn, and then we'll talk after. And I really wasn't sure what they meant by that, but I'm like, okay, sure. So I took the course. I participated. Obviously, I was like aware. I'm like, okay, they're probably just observing to see how I am as a person. And then at the end of the course, I was kind of like antsy, just kind of like waiting. And then Miranda Odre approached me and she's like, hey, how did you like the course? We had a little conversation about it. She's like, well, the team and I felt that you do have really good qualities as a trainer and as a person. So we're going to recommend you to start the internship to be on seminar staff. I'm like, oh my God,
way.
Thank you so much. It's so cool. What is that like? And then she told me, so we'll send a letter of recommendation to Dave Castro and Nicole Carroll. They make the final decision. We're just going to send a letter of recommendation. And we'll CC you in an email. And if they're hiring and they need people, they'll respond to you. Okay, perfect. Send your resume, whatever. So that email chain got going with Dave Castro and Nicole Carroll. And they're like, yeah, we're going to set you up for an internship. And at the same time that this is happening, I end up moving to Colombia. Remember I told you I did that?
Right.
So I moved with my buddy to Colombia, and they accepted me for an internship. And the way that works is I just needed to show up to a level one. And so I scheduled the next closest one back in Miami. So I flew from Medellin back to Miami and attended a level one. And basically the internship back then is you're an assistant to the rest of the team running the level one.
Okay.
So, they gave me very little instructions. Like all you have to do is show up and be ready to assist the team with anything they need. And, the flow master may ask you to coach a movement or two here and there. So just be ready to coach. And that's it. No more instructions or context beyond that. So I was
Talk
like,
about the unknown and the unknowable.
exactly, being ready for the unknown. So yeah, man, that's how it went. I did 4 seminars like that. 4 different level ones. And at each level one, I got a little bit of feedback. I came back for my second one and they wanted to check to see if I could implement the feedback and improve upon the first one or the last one. I did that. And every time I got some feedback, I just took some notes, studied it back at, the home gyms I was coaching at, came back for seminar number 2, 3, 4. And after the 4th one, the flow master there said, hey, we're going to recommend you to be hired, but it's not our decision. It's going to be up to Dave Castro and Nicole Carroll. And, that was a very nerve-wracking, emotional roller coaster. But fortunately, everything worked out. And I got the email saying, congratulations, we'd like to welcome you to the team. And that was 2014.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you just passed 10 years on seminar staff.
Yep, exactly.
Congrats, my man. That's awesome. That's
Thank
a
you,
great
brother.
story.
Thank you, brother. It's been an exciting journey for sure.
That is fantastic. So 2010 you started, 2011 you start coaching. A couple years after that, you're on your L2. 2014 you get hired on seminar staff.
Mm-hmm.
This is all part of your journey. At what point does CrossFit Riptide show up?
So things in Colombia don't work out the way I wanted them to work out. And I decided I'm going to move back to the States. And here on stateside, a really close friend of mine, two close friends of mine, who started CrossFit after I did, decided to open up Riptide CrossFit here in Fort Lauderdale.
Okay.
They had less experience as CrossFit trainers and as CrossFitters, period. So one of them I was really close with, and I was sharing with him my whole experience, just talking to him a lot. He's like, "Well, if you decide to move back to the States and you want to come to Fort Lauderdale, we could use a trainer like yourself that at that time I was already, onboarding to become part of seminar staff."
Right.
So he's like, you could come and help us and maybe help us grow the gym and maybe even help us expand the business. And if we grow to a second location, we can look at a business partnership, bringing you in as a business partner, not just a coach. I'm like, that sounds
Nice.
like a good idea. Let's try it out. So I moved back to Fort Lauderdale. The three of us became roommates, and we dedicated ourselves, all three of us, the two business owners and myself, to just Riptide. Riptide had been open for about a year and change at that point.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe close to two, like a year and a half, going on 2 years. And I worked under their leadership for about a year and a half. And effectively, they tried to open a second location, but that ended up biting them in the butt. And so they ended up bleeding a lot of money, losing a lot of money on the second location, not being able to get permits from the city of Fort Lauderdale, and just a lot of setbacks.
Right.
So with all the loss of money and investment they put into that second location, they pretty much had to fire me, believe it or not. So here I am, level 2 coach, seminar staff, working as their like head trainer, and I have to get fired, kind of sort of thing, laid off.
Right.
And it's not that they wanted to do it, but I totally understood. So
Yeah,
I
it's a
got
business.
laid off from Riptide and I moved back to Miami, and I started coaching at the old gyms I used to coach at, plus CrossFit Wynwood. And then that situation lasted for about 2, 3 years, maybe 2 years, I want to say, until around so 2004, 15, yeah, until 2017. Riptide CrossFit just continued a steady decline. And those old business owners decided to part ways, and they decided to sell or liquidate Riptide.
Right.
So they called me up, offered me the business. We made a deal, and I ended up acquiring and buying Riptide in 2017.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
That's a heck of a story. So I do have one question before we get there though. So you mentioned when the period between when you were laid off at Riptide before you bought Riptide, right?
Hmm.
You were coaching at a few different gyms. What was it like being an L2 seminar staff trainer and working at these other gyms? Did the other trainers look at you differently? Did they respect you differently? Was there an intimidation factor between you and them?
Good question. I don't think there was an intimidation factor. I'd be curious to go back in time and ask all those wonderful coaches, because I worked with some badass coaches in my time. I've worked at like 9 different affiliates, and all of them with teams of like 5 to 10 coaches. So I don't
Wow.
think anyone ever felt intimidated. And like many gyms, like many CrossFit gyms, when I was coaching, the other coaches weren't there, right? I had my shift, my classes.
Right.
And so the other coaches weren't there because they were either off or doing something else. And so,
Right. Other jobs.
so then they would come in and coach their classes when I wasn't coaching, kind of sort of thing, right?
Right.
So there wasn't too much of an opportunity for us to collab and work together or that kind of situation. And then the other thing was that I was around coaches that had more experience, more coaching experience, and or more CrossFit experience than I did.
Right.
So there was never this vibe, contentious vibe of like, I'm better than you because I'm seminar staff or I'm a level 2. I think there was just an implicit understanding that, oh, Santi is taking this way more seriously than we are, because a lot of these coaches just had other jobs, just like still
Right.
nowadays, right? So they were all part-time trainers, passionate about training, helping people and doing CrossFit. And Santi was the coach that was just making it a full-time career.
Right. I
So,
think that's so I think that's so important for all coaches, right, to really take into perspective because when you have someone new come in on staff and they start coaching and they decide to take it, a little bit more serious than you, be positive and supportive of them. Maybe you've got a full-time job and you make a good living and you're just doing this on the side or for fun. But if you see somebody who's really taking it, serious and they want to do well or whatever, whatnot, I think that's such an important aspect. Like I was telling you about Coach Keith, who does the podcast with me as well. He's our L3, and before I even got coaching, he was always so supportive of me. And when I mentioned to him, hey, I'm considering the L1, dude, go get it. Don't think about it. Just go get it. Get after it. When I got into coaching, I had quit my previous career. And it was kind of like a stepping stone for me because I was at home. I didn't have anything to do. I needed something to make a little bit of income to get by for some time. And I just naturally got into it. I actually got into it because one of my coaches, Coach Jen, said, when are you going to start coaching? And I said, I haven't really considered it. And she's like, well, I mean, you're a natural coach. The way you are, the way that you speak to people, the way that you help other athletes, you're a natural coach. Now we just need to get you with that directive in mind so that you're actually doing it.
that's
And that's
awesome.
how I got into it.
That's awesome. Shout out to Coach Jen for inspiring you.
Yeah, yeah. Shout out to Jen, she's the best.
What were you doing?
And
May I ask, what were you doing as a career before coaching?
before coaching, I worked in television. I spent 22 years in and out of TV stations in South Florida. I worked for NBC6. I worked
Oh,
for
nice.
Telemundo. I worked for CBS4. I went to school for radio and television broadcast programming. Like you said, when you were at a certain age, you just knew, all right, I'm never gonna be that person working a regular 9 to 5 job. I never had that. My mom was a teacher, my dad was a business owner, and I always, kind of had the two sides to pick from. Where do I want to get into entrepreneurship or do I want to get into a school system or a system, so to speak? And television's one of those things that always came natural to me. I went throughout all of college, never bought any books. I never needed any books. I just paid attention in class, took notes, and I cared, right? Two of my rules are apply yourself and give a crap. If you do those two things, it's hard to fail at anything.
I
And
love that.
so
I love that. Yeah, super cool.
that is what I did in television, and I did it for a long time.
Can I
Um,
ask? Can I
un-
ask what specifically did you do? Like producer, director? Were you the host, the script writer, the editor?
so I started out as a tape operator. There was still tapes when I started. This
Nice.
was 2005 when I started, 2004. But I
Okay.
started as a tape operator with editing because I wanted to be a video editor, and
Okay.
then from there became a video editor. When I switched over, I was freelancing for NBC6 at the time. I was a video editor there, and then I did video editing probably for 6 years as an employee, and then got an opportunity with Telemundo to work on their web team. So I was actually a producer, uh, what they call predator, producer, editor, writer, the whole nine, making videos for online. Then I got the opportunity to transfer up to Orlando. When I transferred to Orlando, it was for an operations manager position, but that position never actually came to fruition because of COVID.
Mm.
So I ended up transitioning where I was still doing the operations manager duties in addition to IT engineering.
Wow.
I was in charge of the live trucks. I was in charge of the photographers.
You
All of
became
that.
you became the jack of all trades.
I was the jack of all trades, and it was very good for me to do that because, like I tell everybody, this is why me and CrossFit get along so well. My life, my brain is constantly varied,
I love
and
that.
CrossFit being constantly varied is just such a great fit for me.
I love that.
Um,
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think most people should
yeah.
strive to be that well-rounded, right? In other aspects of life.
Well, I mean, there's both sides to the coin. Some people are just really good at one thing and they're the best at that one thing. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Sure, sure. Yeah, yeah. I'm not saying they're at odds with each other.
Right,
It's good to be able to specialize in something, but
right,
it shouldn't come at a cost where all your other aspects in life suck.
right,
So yeah, you
right.
can be, I don't know, the best dad in the world, but I don't know. It's hard to say you're the best dad in the world, but you can't make a living for your family. You know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll tell you, man, one quote that I've never forgotten. I had a basketball coach when I was in high school. I played 3 years of varsity basketball. And one of my coaches, I'll never forget, we were in practice and I went down court, stole the ball from one of the other players, ran it back, and when I came down the other side, I threw the ball away. And he called my attention. He's like, Frankie, you got to remember something. You have to play on 100% of the court. You can't be good on one side and not good on the other. You can't make decisions on one side and not on the other. This goes for the basketball court and this goes for life. You have to be good on both sides of the court.
I
And I
like that.
never forgot that. Never, ever forgot that. So, there's,
Speaking of good coaches, right? That's an
yeah,
example of a good coach. They come up these sports and coaches and good teachers that we experience in our childhood. They can have such an impact. What a great
tremendous, tremendous
sports
impact.
quote and what a great coach. Love that.
Yeah, man. And it's always been on me, like I always have that little that little chip on my shoulder that I got to be good on both sides of the court. I got to be good on both sides of the court. And then, I get into CrossFit and I'm always hearing, how you do anything is how you do everything, right? And it's like, okay, I align with that. I really align with that. And, just to summarize the story of where I came from and whatnot, towards the end of 2022, I I was just really stressed out at my job and wasn't enjoying it anymore. There was a lot of politics involved that I didn't want to deal with. And I ended up just cold turkey quitting one day. And one of the reasons why I was able to quit was just the confidence that I had grown in myself from doing CrossFit over the past year. And so as
That's
I
so
quit
freaking
that,
cool.
as I quit that, I said, hey, you know what? I can start training more now. So I ended up in the gym more. And being in the gym more, that's when Jen took advantage to say, hey, you know what? I overheard that you're no longer working. Why don't you start coaching? And naturally, this is where I'm at now.
I love it, dude. How long have you been coaching now?
So I've been coaching since 2023. I got my L1 and I got my L1 May of 23. Got my L2 January of 24.
That's
And
awesome.
yeah, and now I'm on the way to the L3. I took the exam one time, didn't pass. It was a very humbling experience, and probably one of the coolest experiences I've had because as I was taking the exam, I was like, I don't know that. That's something I need to remember. I don't know that. That's something I need to remember. So I came home and I have a pretty decent memory. I have all these questions that I wrote down in my head that I'm seeking answers for, and I'm like, this is only going to make me that much better because these are the things that I need to work on. And it was a really humbling experience.
That's awesome, dude. I love the fact that you've interpreted that experience with that kind of humility and that kind of mindset, right? Because, most people can easily get discouraged in a situation like that and be so critical on themselves that sets them back. It could be a huge setback. But for
It
you,
could, man.
yeah,
It, you know, and again, that's why we actually titled the podcast "Failure is Progress," right? Because I came to terms with that. I would say probably somewhere around the time like 2018, 2019 is when I really started to hone in on the fact that I loved failing. I absolutely love learning and failing because the more open I am to making a mistake or to not getting something right, the closer I am to getting it right. And so, I just a quick little side note, I took my real estate exam in the process from when I started coaching. It was almost like right at the same time. One of my cousins is big in real estate in Miami, and he's like, "Oh, you should do it." And I listened to him. I ended up taking the real estate exam 4 times. And the
Mm,
real estate exam, probably the hardest exam I've ever taken, was a Pearson View exam, similar to what the CrossFit Certified Trainer exam is. So
I
when I
got you.
sat down, my perspective was consistent, was very different, as opposed to like, I want to get this over with. It was like, all right, let's see what I have to learn, and let me see how
Mm,
much I do know, and it's kind of like a formidable opponent. Now I have this exam that is a formidable opponent that I have to tackle.
yes, yes. I love that, man. That's awesome, dude. It's great perspective, to be honest.
I appreciate
And
it, man.
props to you, man, because it takes a lot of failure and humility to get to that perspective. And maybe that has been your case, but the fact that you're so eager about the learning process and the actual process itself versus, getting stuck on the end result. And I think
Right.
that's where a lot of people, I think, fail when it comes to mindset or their outlook or attitudes towards life is people get fixated on the end result and they fail to recognize that the process, the journey of learning, failing, growing, small wins, that journey is where the value lies more so than the piece of paper, the document, the stamp or the certificate or whatever you want to call of the end result.
Absolutely. I have this conversation with at least one or two of my athletes every week. I have one athlete in particular who is taking our barbell club, and yesterday she was having an atrocious day. She was like, I couldn't get this, I couldn't get this. And I said, hey, remember, every failed lift today is a gained lift tomorrow. So if we were working towards a 1 rep max, at some point you have to fail. The purpose is to go to at some point you fail. Once you hit that ceiling, that's where you know that's your ceiling. If you kept getting every single lift, you'd just be the Incredible Hulk.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
she kind of laughed about it, and she's like, I know, but I get in my head, and I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm here for. That's exactly why I'm here.
Yeah.
That's why I'm your coach.
Yep.
Um,
That's why she
but that's
pays you.
exactly what it is. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Everyone. It's so easy for people to get into their own head about why they couldn't do something or how they could have done something better, as opposed to just appreciating the moment or appreciating what it took. I remember when I first started CrossFit, we have a programming in our gyms that we use called Level Method. I don't know if you've heard of it,
I don't think
but
so.
it's a color based system, which is kind of cool. It uses like jujitsu colors, so you start off white level, and then you go all the way up to black level. And when I first started, even though I had been an athlete my whole life, and even though I had been in and out of gyms my whole life, I came in, and the first thing that Jen said to me was, if you can check your ego out the door, you will succeed in this. And being someone who's had very little ego for most of my life, I was like, no problem. So I come in, I do all my foundations, and I end up being a yellow level athlete. And I'm like, all right, cool, yellow. So the next color is orange, the next one's blue, the next one's purple. And I'm like, this is going to be fun. And I remember going through different assessments month to month and being able to push those colors from yellow to yellow 2 to orange 2 to orange 3, little by little, the little tiny steps.
Hmm.
Now I'm at a point where I've kind of peaked and I don't get those little wins like I used to. And I miss that time, I'm happy that I appreciated it. I appreciated every single time I was able to level up in one of my assessments, because I was like, I know this isn't going to always be the case. There's
Right.
there's a certain point where yesterday I back squatted 315 for the first time. That
There
felt
you go.
amazing.
There you go. That's
That
a big
doesn't
number,
happen
dude.
every day.
Congrats.
It's fun, but it doesn't happen every day. So when it does happen, celebrate it and love it. When it doesn't happen, celebrate it and love that too, because it's not going to last forever.
For sure. For sure. How old are you, Frankie?
I am 40. I'll be 41 in April.
That's awesome. I love it.
Viejito.
Yeah. And then the other thing too with at least fitness and performance is, once you start aging, the wins start to look in the shape of anti-aging.
Of course.
So you start to shift your mindset. It's like, okay, maybe not so much, you know, Am I getting faster, stronger? Yeah, we want to get faster, stronger, have more endurance and all that stuff. But how am I feeling and looking, and what's my health like as I'm aging?
Right.
And so, and according to our definition, it's fitness throughout life, right?
Yeah.
So as we get older,
Absolutely.
are we going to be that 50, 60, 70-year-old badass who can still overhead squat a barbell and punk our grandkids and, step outside of a gym, look good and hang out and go on vacation and ride roller coasters, rock climb, I don't know, hike
Yeah.
mountains at the age of 60? I think that's going to be our measure of wins. And I think that's what,
Absolutely.
I don't want to sound like Mr. Righteous, but I think that's the right and the healthiest approach once you pass a
100%.
certain age. Now, if you're 22 getting into CrossFit, that's not your worry. You're trying to win some throwdowns.
Right, right.
But if you
That's
started CrossFit as an adult, right, it's like any other sport. If you start a sport at a very young age, then competition and performance is your priority. But
right.
people like you and I, we started CrossFit as adults and we started CrossFit for our own well being. Then that's where the wins are. They're not in winning at Wadapalooza or whatever.
Of course. I mean, in my case, I say this all the time. Like I started CrossFit for mental health. When I took my L1, Melissa Reed, she asked that question, right? What is CrossFit? That's the first question. And my response was that it's mental health that gets your body fit. And to this day, that is what it is for me. There are days when I go to the gym and I don't work out.
Hmm.
But being in the gym, just making it there and getting through the door, aside from it being my job, it makes me feel better.
Yeah,
I
for sure.
enjoy being there. I enjoy being around the people. The moment I step in, I get this overwhelming feeling of gratitude. Like this is where I get to be today. I don't
Sure.
have to go to where my previous job was. I don't have to do some dirty work. I get to come in here and see a bunch of fit people strive to be the best versions of themselves today.
I
And
love that.
it's an empowering feeling. It really is, man. But I'm just grateful for all of it.
That's awesome,
Santi,
dude.
you were talking about when you're young, trying to get into competition and all that. So I was going to ask you, have you ever been on the competitive circuit, or has this always been just a fitness and business for you?
Oh, no, no. I absolutely still compete with myself every day. I show up to the gym. I love to take class at the gym. And depending on who's in the gym, we have a couple of fire breathers at Riptide. And I'm like, all right, what do they do? Or let's go, and I still try to compete. And so, knock on wood, I'm not injured. I haven't been. And I'm fortunate to have a decent level of fitness, especially for being, 41. But when it comes to technically like signing up and registering for local comps, yeah, man, I did Wadapalooza 2, 3 times. Three. I've done
Nice.
Wadapalooza 3 different years, maybe four. Shit, I don't remember. Maybe four. And I've done the freaking throwdown a couple of times. And I've done like in-house comps with my first gyms. And
Nice.
I did a competition in Colombia. So yeah, I've done a few competitions.
What about let's talk about the open. Have you ever been to like regionals or quarterfinals, semifinals?
Regionals, no. Regionals was a beast of a level, so I was never that good. But I did qualify to quarterfinals for every year that it existed. Rest in peace,
Nice.
quarterfinals. Yep.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah. So yeah, that's where my career as a competitive athlete ends too. Yeah, yeah.
That is
And in
awesome,
the
man.
CrossFit space, quarterfinals was the most I ever gotten to, and it was cool, man. I mean, the reason why I think it's so cool, it's because I accomplished that by just doing one workout a day, 1 hour a day, 4 or 5 days a week. And so
That is dope.
I think there is something to be said about regular CrossFit for everyday life, and that being good enough to allow you to just hang in there and, be able to move on to a second stage or be able to sign up for a local throwdown and not come in last place.
Absolutely.
I think that's pretty cool
Absolutely.
because obviously we know that, there's tons of people out there who are doing 2, 3 hours of training a day or more, right? That's 2 hours, I think, is Still
Well, I
very
mean,
little compared to a lot of people.
I don't know if the original saying goes back to Coach Glassman, but uh, CrossFit, even done poorly, can be very effective, right?
Yeah,
So that's a huge testament to that because you've got career athletes who just train. That's all they do. I mean, you're talking about the equivalent of someone who plays like weekend football, or let's say play soccer on the weekends and they're able to qualify and compete and on a worldwide board against the best players in the world end up at that level. So that
yeah,
is a huge accomplishment.
yeah. So that's where my competition career is at. But I've never pursued it like as a goal or as a priority.
Right.
I always do the open, and then if a cool competition is coming up and I feel like they have smart programming and they have a team division and there's a couple of buddies at the gym that I can align with philosophically or just, yeah, let's do this. And they invite me, then I'll do it. But I don't go out of my way
Nice.
to compete.
So let me ask you, speaking of competitors, you said you have a few fire breathers over there and whatnot. So what is it like from your mindset, right? Somebody who's got as much experience as you have. You've been on seminar staff 10 years. You're in L3 now. What is it like when you're coaching these fire breathers versus when you're coaching like a newer athlete who's been doing CrossFit less than 6 months?
That's a really good question. That depends. It depends a lot on the person, right? Everyone responds differently to different styles of coaching. People have different vibes, but it can be both can be fun and challenging in different ways. A fire breather clearly moving faster, heavier loads with better technique. So it becomes a little bit more of a challenge to focus in on the smaller details.
Right.
So it's almost like watching footage or video of sports or athletes in slow motion. Being able to have the years of coaching that I have and the thousands of reps and people that I've coached kind of slow down their movement in my head and have this internal coaching process and asking myself, okay, what can I contribute to the athlete right now in this moment, this movement, this workout? How can I make them a little bit better? How can I bring value to them? So I do have to slow down a little bit, focus a little bit more, and then be able to deliver something that's going to bring a positive impact to them. So that's case by case. The beginner athlete is easier in the sense that they're going to come in with a lot more movement faults, so to speak.
More exaggerated faults.
Yeah, so it'll just be a very easy, like, hey, let's get you in better positions. Let's get you coordinating these movement patterns better.
Right.
And that has always been very easy for me to just be able to give people something simple, one thing to think about, give it to them, make a change in their movement, their workout, high five, and then let's move
Yeah.
on.
Each is challenging in their own way. I remember when I did my L1, one of my coaches, Adrian Conway, who I love Adrian.
Hmm.
He was telling us, you guys have to understand something. If you are coaching, it does not matter who walks through the door, they are your athlete. Do not be intimidated if Rich Froning walks in the door to coach him.
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't care if it's Rich Froning. You make sure his heels are flat on the ground. You make sure that his knees are tracking over his toes. You make sure he's got a nice S curve on his back because he's paying you to coach him. And I will always keep that in mind because I do have athletes that are those fire breathers who've been doing CrossFit for 10, plus years. And they're like, well, you've only been doing it too. Okay, cool. But I'm watching you. You're not watching yourself.
Yeah.
I need you to drop that weight a little bit because even though you're stronger than everybody else, you're not stronger than everybody else with perfect technique.
Yeah. 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 It's
But
definitely a different beast. But like Adrian said, and we say that on seminar staff, and we tell that to level one and level two participants, you know, it can be intimidating if you have been doing CrossFit less or they're more fit than you are. But if you study, you study, and we have
right.
like some newer coaches at our gym and they feel intimidated with, our quote unquote fire breathers, right? Like, oh, but
Yeah.
this person's been doing it longer than you have. I'm like, the question you need to ask yourself is this: are you going home and creating lesson plans? Are you studying movement? Are you studying exercise phys? Are you reading the journal articles? Because chances are that these members that are coming and crushing these workouts are not putting in the study time and absorbing and learning the craft of coaching and movement the way you are. So I don't care if the person can do 20 unbroken muscle ups or a 200-pound snatch and you can't. They're not studying it the way you are. So there's an angle there that they're paying you for that they're not spending time on. And that's the angle you got to just double down on. Make sure you're studying your craft. And if you are, then that's it. You're going to watch them. Yeah, you're going to watch the movement. You're going to assess. You're going to find a flaw. And if you don't find a flaw, make them go a little bit faster. Push them a little bit till you find their threshold, as we say.
Yeah.
And once you find their threshold, then that's where your work comes in. You're going to help them work or move better at a higher speed or higher load or both, or increase that threshold, that ceiling of where they start to break down. That's where you have the conversation with them and you're like, hey, look, I want you to be able to move a little bit faster, a little bit heavier, and I'm going to help you do that. Let's work on XYZ.
I love that. I love that. Santi, man, I appreciate the time you've given me. I don't want to take up too much more of it. There's only one thing that I wanted to ask you specifically because in my studying, I came across a video of you. I believe you were coaching the push jerk, and Chuck Carswell was actually like grading you while you were doing it.
Oh, I know that video, yes.
What is it like coaching and having Chuck Carswell look over your shoulder the whole time?
I mean, to be honest with you, when I was first on staff, it was nerve-wracking. But nowadays, it's phenomenal, dude. Same, I guess, similar mindset to what you were saying about loving to fail.
Right.
For me, it's loving to get feedback. I love to be observed. And in the same way in class, like working out, the coaches at the gym, I like to tell them, please don't neglect me while I'm working out. Just because I know how to do the muscle up or the movement that we have in class doesn't mean I don't want to be coached. In fact, I want you to watch me and help me out, And so same thing with Chuck watching me coach. I was a little bit nervous because there was a camera on and I know I was going for CrossFit.com and all that stuff.
Right.
But that was just a little bit of nerves because I wanted to do a good job. But I was more excited about his assessment. And then afterwards, being able to have that conversation with him to get his feedback, I was like stoked for it.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, man, I've seen you coach in person. I'm still blown away by the fact that you could manage. I think there was 28 of us or 30 of us in that level 2 course, and you managed to say all of our names, touch points with us multiple times, and correct multiple faults all at once. Everybody was paying attention. It was beautiful. So you're a master of your craft, brother.
Thank you, brother. It's been a lot of work, and I still got a long way to go.
We all do. We all do. Tell my listeners where they can find you if they want to follow you or Riptide.
Yes, absolutely. Instagram, Santi Callejas 10. So Santi Callejas 10.
Perfect.
Riptide CrossFit on Instagram as well. Both are connected to each other. Here in Fort Lauderdale, if any of your listeners ever come into town, they're in the Orlando area, right?
We're in the Orlando area. Yep. Davenport.
Yeah. So any of y'all ever come into Fort Lauderdale, we'd love to have you drop into the gym. And that's pretty much it, dude. And then like you found me on CrossFit.com. If they start searching through CrossFit YouTube videos, they might find me there too.
Yeah, man. I'll have to drop in at your spot sometime and check it out and see you again in person.
Dude, I would love that. Please do. And if I'm in Orlando, I'm definitely hitting you up.
Yeah, for sure. We'd love to have you, man. Thank you so much, Santi. You have a beautiful day, my brother.
Thank you, man. It was a pleasure. Thank you for this invitation. And I enjoyed this conversation, man. I look forward to hearing it when it comes out or spreading it, I guess. I don't know if I want to hear myself talk for another hour.
Thanks so much.